It is the final word, Border Gavaskar Trophy Daily, Adelaide Oval out the back. The net's behind us here where so much focus has been over the last few days since the Australians arrived, especially the Indians too. They did an open training here with 5,000 people a couple of nights ago when I arrived. It's the first time I've seen clouds in the sky. The cool change is almost certainly coming. 38.2 degrees was the maximum temperature today with the sun beating down. Thus the 2020 sunnies we're wearing. More about them later. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, cbussuper.com.au. Geoff, tell us a story. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling hot and I'm feeling sticky, and yeah, there is the idea that a storm will come. Maybe it'll go through before play starts, given we've got the day-night test, and there might be a cool change. Whoever's bowling first might be happy about that because it probably gets hotter through the weekend. I wouldn't fancy trying to be out there bowling in this. It's been bloody hot in Adelaide. Other places in Australia, maybe, I think Adelaide does bloody hot better than most places. It just scorches here in a way that, and I know it smashes you in Perth, but somehow Adelaide heat, because it's not always hot here, feels like it's more somehow.
There's that great film that former guest of the show, William McGuinness, the film called Look Both Ways, which is set in Adelaide on a desperately hot weekend. And yes, yesterday it kind of reminded me of that this morning as well, where it felt like there was sort of sizzling off the pavement. I went for a run today and was absolutely knackered after a few kilometres because it's that kind of heat, but it'll dissipate. What is hot and steamy as well, excuse the handbrake analogy here, is the pressure. It's the cauldron environment around the Australian team. It's been described by some, myself, as a referendum on this Australian team. They lose this week and change is going to come. Change is going to come.
And it may not be a cool change.
And if they win this week, all will be swell when we go to the Wool and Jabber in 3 days after the test match. It's got so much riding on it because when you go 2-0 down, well, it's pretty obvious that the route of victory is very unlikely.
Yes, I suppose that's the case. But from 1-0 down, it's also pretty unlikely. Australian teams historically haven't come back at home, but maybe historically doesn't mean much at the moment.
Do you know the last time Australia came from 1-0 down in a series? Here's a clue. We spoke about it on Storytime a couple of days ago. How closely are you listening to my answers, Geoff?
Was it 1997?
Very good.
There we go.
97, where Australia went 1-0 down and they found a way through and won up north and came back and won at Notts as well. But yeah, like you're right in saying though, it isn't a position that Australia have traditionally been comfortable with. They like to be front runners and put enormous pressure on visiting teams, not going this way through.
Well, but they do have the pink ball test, and that's interesting. So Pat Cummins these days, probably always actually, but maybe he's refined it more and more over time. In his press conferences, he gets asked leading questions, and he just goes the straightest bat. He's nice about it. He's pleasant. He's not chippy going, no, we don't care about that. He goes, oh yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't really have much to say about that. Or he goes, well, it could be like this, or it could be another way as well. So one of the questions was, do you have an advantage in pink ball tests? Now Australia have played 12 pink ball tests here at Adelaide Oval. Mitchell Starc's played all of them. Nathan Lyon's played all of them. So they haven't all been at Adelaide. A couple have been in. Some have been in Brisbane.
Couple in Perth as well.
Right, and they didn't end up playing one in India because England did and someone else did.
Ahmedabad, and they played one against Bangladesh at Calcutta back in 19, and they played Sri Lanka in 22. I can't remember where, but yeah, India have played 4
Brisbane,
all up,
and
they've won 3 out of the 4. The one they lost was here at Adelaide in 2021, when of course this was the scene of the All-Out 36. Australia have won all but the game, which was the last time they played with the pink ball in Brisbane in January. So, make of that what you will. But Adelaide, you're right. They haven't lost here in a pink ball test match. The other thing I noted today in the numbers is that when Australia have been able to bat first, as in the first innings of the match, they've made no fewer than 442 for 5 declared. So, their model, their blueprint here at Adelaide has been pretty obvious. Bat first, bat for about 4 to 4.5 sessions, pop in the exhausted opposition late on day 2, roll through them and then build up scoreboard pressure.
Which is funny because that's, in a way, what India did with those late sessions, those late bursts of wickets in Perth. So here in the nets yesterday, Smith and Labuschagne, who both failed in the first test and have some pressure on them. They were really aggressive. They were middling the pink ball and they were smashing it. And they were both going through the offside a lot. Smith was cover driving a lot. Labuschagne was cutting a lot. He smoked Mitchell Starc a couple of times on the front foot as well. And Smith was also edging back onto his stumps quite a bit and getting very annoyed about that with the ball swinging in. But it did indicate that there was movement with that pink ball. So it'll be interesting to see whether that's borne out on the field. And that was one of the tiny little bits that Cummins gave away, where he said, obviously, all of the talk around Labuschagne, he can't help noticing that there's talk about how active he's been, or how much he's been looking to score at the crease, and basically implying that he will try to do that. He'll make more of a point of trying to do that in this test.
Yeah, it's an attitudinal thing, right? He came into Perth talking about being Australia's Pajara, and yep, it was an extraordinarily challenging passage of play when he walked in on evening 1, and of course 2 from 52 or whatever it was looks dreadful. The innings looked tortured, but from those who've been watching the nets closely, Bharat Sundaresan not least, have said that he has been absolutely looking to literally get on the front foot, which was a problem in Perth, where he was playing across his stumps and looking to play balls on the back foot that were well outside the off stump, beaten time and time again. So the first thing that's different is he's trying to get on the front foot early, and he's trying to hit the ball hard. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating, because the reality is if Labuschagne doesn't make runs here, they will make a change before Brisbane, unless he kind of gets a couple of starts and they win, and they might go the whole don't change your winning team, form might be around the corner. But most likely scenario, no runs here, no spot after this, which is sometimes a liberating thing for cricketers. Speaking to Mike Hussey about it a couple of weeks ago, about when he walked out at the Oval in 2009, and he heard Ian Chappell on the television saying that this would be his last test innings, and that gave him the freedom to strum one of his great hundreds for Australia, albeit in a losing cause. So yeah, that might be something that helps Labuschagne find the kind of tempo where making hundreds was routine, especially here at Adelaide, where he's got 3 of them and averages like in the 70s.
Yep. So one change for Australia only. Boland in for Hazlewood. Boland bowled really well against India in the World Test Championship final. Had a decent run out in the PM's 11. Losing Hazlewood is a big deal. Those last 9 tests that they've played, that India have played in Australia, where Hazlewood, they've had that unchanged 4-man attack through all of those 9 tests. Hazlewood took 35 wickets at 22 in those, even though they've only won 2 of them. So he's got a remarkably good record, even though India have been the dominant force in those. This is now the 3rd of that sequence of series.
Yeah, and it's the first time the big 4 or big 3 fast bowlers, have been broken up since Leeds in 2023, which was the most recent time that Boland played. I'm glad you mentioned the World Test Championship final. So much is made of Boland in Australia and the fact that he's got 28 wickets at 12 in home test matches, which is a ridiculous number. But the World Test Championship final, where he picked up Kohli and Jaiswal in the same over on the final morning, that was instrumental in Australia getting that trophy, or that sabre, or whatever the fuck they call it. So Boland
Mace,
ever reliable, 35. It's probably the last chance he'll get to have a sustained run in the side if Hazlewood doesn't get back. But Cummins made a good point that with Hazlewood, they've occasionally pushed him a little bit too hard when a little bit injured, and that's caused the injury to be felt for longer, whereas this time he was back bowling in the nets last night, so albeit at half pace.
They're talking about him coming back for Brisbane. That's their aim, openly. And if not that, then Melbourne. So they hopefully won't miss much.
And the other selection point, I referenced this on social media recently. So Marshy's playing, and Pat's saying that they considered it. He said to me on our SEN chat that they did bring Webster in for a reason. That wasn't just for fun. They did consider whether Marsh would be fit to play this test match with a couple of different ailments, including a back problem we hear now as well. I think there's 2 things here. One, you can probably get away with running the gauntlet in Adelaide a little bit more due to the fact that pink ball test matches on average finish quicker. So that's point 1. And point 2, they genuinely say that Marsh is going to bowl. It's not a case of him playing as a specialist bat, which was mooted a couple of days ago. So, yeah, will he have the miles in the legs? That's a different question. But the threshold point, will Marsh bowl if required? Cummins answered effusively that he will.
Yes, and, with that pink ball, where he can swing it a bit, where he's got that focus on movement through the air, he might be an asset with that, and he might not have to bowl a whole lot. And also he was asked about Labuschagne bowling and said a reasonable amount of that in Perth was to do with trying to keep Hazlewood from bowling too many overs in Perth when they thought that he already had a problem. So there might be a little bit less mad cat bouncer theory from Labuschagne running in. Should we have a break before we talk about India?
Before we do, just rounding out, a significant week for South Australian cricket. 3 South Australians in the Test 11.
Yeah.
And if you fold Nathan Lyon in, who played 4 years of domestic cricket here as well, that's a big thing here for the city. Huge crowds expected. Nathan McSweeney, the state captain, huge week for him. I'm not saying that they would punt him after 2 matches, but it wouldn't be without precedent. If you were struggling after a couple of test matches, that's when the scrutiny does tend tend to land on your shoulders. So
Cam Bancroft in 2019, Philip Hughes in 2009.
Bobby Quiney, who played his second and final Test match here in 2012 after the magnificent Quiney 9 in Brisbane only a few days prior. I mean, it's just the wider point that it's a huge week for SA cricket. Travis Head's made hundreds at his home ground the last 2 years, including his only major score last summer was here in a relatively speaking low-scoring game where he got 119 and of course...
Was the difference?
It was the difference. He was player of the match the last 2 times that Australia have played here. So that's worth noting on the way through. That huge week for Australian cricket, huge week for South Australian cricket. As you say, let's go to a break via noting that CBUS Super is where you can invest your money if you choose to, your retirement savings, which is mandated and all the rest of it. So your money will go somewhere. But if it goes with an industry fund like CBUS Super, it is with the knowledge that they have an 8.87% average return across their 40 years of existence. Their past performance isn't a reliable indicator of future performance, but that's in their My Super default account. But that's a return that's worth noting. And they operate in an environment where there is a test that their expenditure needs to meet in order to make sure that money is put back into where it belongs in members' accounts. So cbussuper.com.au. And as we said throughout the course of last week as well, Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Geoff, they're here for you. They're working on behalf of working people. Very similar energy to CBUS in that respect. Since 1919, Maurice Blackburn have been tasked with the objective of making sure that legal representation is affordable. And as we know, most of their work is on a no-win, no-fee basis.
It is the final word daily with Geoff Lemon, Adam Collins. India, what are they doing? We never know what India's doing because they never like to tell us. The KL Rahul bit yesterday enjoyed coming into the presser and saying, well, I know where I'm batting, but I've been told not to tell you.
Yes.
Just tell us. What's the
line.
secrets about? What are you trying to achieve? What's the big deal here? What's the big aim? Is it just stirring the anxiety? Is it just keeping the tension alive? Who's going to bat where? All the rest of it. Well, he's in the team. We know he's kept his spot. Has he kept his spot opening? Probably, hopefully. Does Rohit Sharma come in the middle order? Probably, but we're not sure. Does Shubman Gill come back? Have they taken his internet connection away? And is the hand healed up in time to be able to come back at 3? He did bat in the PM's 11 games, so presumably he's good to go.
Got 50 there.
So Patakal would go out. Jurel would presumably go out. Does that mean Rohit comes in at 5 or does he come in at 6? Do they move Rishabh?
Yep. Does
Rohit open and they drop KL Rahul down to 6? So many possibilities, and we won't have an idea until 29 minutes before the start of play.
Yeah, so many possibilities, so much time. Whereas with Australia, we know so much. I mean, I asked Pat whether he's taking the new ball. He is. We know so much. We know so much of what's going on with the Aussie team because of the scrutiny on them, and they felt it was, I guess, better to fill the vacuum. India seldom do, but you're right. Good problems to have. Think about before Perth when all the conversation was around who India didn't have. Obviously, Shami, Kuldeep Yadav, Rohit Sharma on paternity leave, and Shubman Gill breaking his finger in the lead-up. It feels certain to me that Gill, having made 200s against England earlier in the year, I'd be staggered if he doesn't come in. We know that he was so capable against the Australian attack when he first visited and made his debut here in 2020 and 2021. Rohit batting 6 would be a nice little throwback. He batted 6 here in 2018, didn't he? When he was in the side as a middle order player. So that might be the case. They might shuffle Rishabh down to 6, like you say before, and maybe Rohit bats 5 directly after Kohli. There'd be some fun in that as well. So what I do know is that Jaiswal's in a great mood. I saw him in the cafe we were having a bite in before. Sitting there enjoying life, drinking what looked to be a flat white, and enjoying the anonymity that comes with being an Indian cricketer who can kind of still walk the streets. I suspect he won't be able to walk the streets for much longer, though. He's going to be a global superstar. We all know that already. And he's got over 1,200 runs this calendar year and 3 more tests this year. Whisper it. He could get up beyond 1,500 runs, which 4 people have done ever. That would be bloody exciting.
Joe Root's big year the other year was one of those,
Yusuf,
wasn't it? And Viv Richards.
I think there's a Graham Smith, there's a Ricky Ponting, or 2 maybe Ricky Pontings, and a Joe Root in that list. So
it's like the Christmas song.
Yeah.
2 Ricky Pontings and a Jaiswal. There we go.
So, Jaiswal this week, all eyes on him. Who he opens with, I suppose we'll find out at the toss tomorrow. Bharat reckons Ash is playing. Reckons Ashwin is playing.
He said that in Perth, though,
He said that in Perth. He's also written that Labuschane's a lock for 100 this week, so, predictions sometimes don't count for a lot, but if he were to play, it'd be the start of his 8th Border Gavaskar series, and he did bowl well when he played in Australia last time, and he was the match winner here in 2018 on that final afternoon.
Yes.
So, I'd love to see it.
I mean, of course we want to see it. Why wouldn't you want to see the guy with 500 Test wickets playing? It just seems bizarre that he didn't play in Perth, given what he would bring with bat and ball. You know, I concede that he gives up a little bit to Washington Sundar in the field, because Ashwin's not the swiftest across the ground anymore, if he ever was. But still, I would have imagined that with his bowling smarts, he'd want him in the side.
Yeah, what he gives away and that he gets with what he has psychologically in terms of the advantage he's been able to press home against the Australians. Jadeja's in the same boat. It wouldn't shock me if Jadeja rocks up and he's batting 4 tomorrow, or 5 or something. These things are always possible with India.
It's just the old-fashioned. Who does your opposition prefer to see? Do they want to see Ashwin and Jadeja or Washington Sundar? They probably want to see Washington Sundar.
Yeah, even though I think Sundar bowled okay in the second innings last week. It's more that bigger picture that you're describing there about. But anyway, we don't have a lot to offer on that because A, Rohit's not done his presser yet. B, he won't tell us anything at the presser anyway. And that's fine. It's his prerogative.
And I suppose in terms of quicks, there's the do they keep Rana or do they go? You want the swing bowler for the conditions out here.
I would say fuck yes. I would keep Harshit Rana in the team. I would never take him out of the team at the moment. Bowling as well as he did last week, and Siraj as well. You look at the wickets Siraj got last week. You know, it's easy to say that Bumrah was the dominant player in the match, and he absolutely was. One of the great performances as an away seamer in this country. But Siraj got pretty much the whole top order as well across the 2 innings. So those two together off the top, the swing of Reddy, who did shape the ball around in the mid-120s, I think they're a perfectly balanced attack already.
Yes, I suppose so. It's just whether you. I suppose you can go too hard on swing because Siraj can swing it. Yep. And all the rest of it. So plenty of decisions to be made by India, and they'll probably bring someone in from outside the squad who we've never heard of who's 17, because they like to do stuff like that.
We saw Gavaskar last night. Is Gavaskar available?
Yeah.
He'll probably open if he's asked to.
If required. If, as Michael Clark said, if the right person were to ask me the question, I would consider my answer.
He's never been better at getting the hot takes picked up. He advanced the view about the rift in the Australian camp and Cummins this afternoon in the presser. The one effusive answer he did give was that was gotten 100% wrong about the way that was reported. Anyway, that doesn't matter. It's all the fun of the fair when the Australian team lose at home. If they lose this week, it's going to be absolute carnage. Follow every single day of how it all plays out on our shows. Hit the little subscribe button so you're alerted when the episodes go live on YouTube. Follow us on the podcast feed. If you're in Adelaide and hearing this late, come to our live show at the Rhino Room tonight with Aaron Finch. That's about it.
Yeah, 7 p.m. If you're hearing this, come on down. I reckon there'll be about 10 tickets left on the door. So if you're one of those people, rock up and we'll find a way to squeeze you in.
All right, Border Gavaskar Daily, Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, CBUS Soup. We love yous all. Chat you later.
Bye-bye.